My wife stood at the podium of the Grandview Hotel ballroom, champagne glass raised, her Harvard MBA diploma practically glowing behind her on the projection screen. She was beautiful that night, confident in her success, surrounded by 200 of her closest colleagues and family members, celebrating her promotion to senior vice president. And she was about to publicly humiliate me in a way I'd never forget. "I want to thank everyone who made this possible," Caroline said, her voice carrying that particular tone of condescension I'd learned to recognize over our 8 years of marriage. Especially my father, Richard, who taught me that in business, you have to know when to cut your losses. She paused for effect, and I felt my stomach drop because I knew what was coming. I'd heard variations of this speech in our kitchen, in our bedroom, whispered to her mother over wine, but never in public, never in front of everyone we knew. My husband, Jake, sitting right there, she pointed, directly at me, and 200 heads turned to stare. He dropped out of college to start what he calls a business, a little software company he runs out of our garage. And honestly, it's time someone said what we're all thinking. It's failing, Jake. Your cute little coding project is drowning, and it's dragging our family name down with it. The room went quiet. Not the respectful quiet of a heartfelt moment, but the uncomfortable silence of people witnessing something they shouldn't. "So tonight I'm making an announcement," Caroline continued, and I saw her father Richard nodding approvingly from his table. "Tomorrow morning, my father and I are going to Jake's office. We're going to make him an offer to buy his company. Not because it's worth anything, but because someone needs to put it out of its misery before he embarrasses us further." Richard stood up, raising his glass. To Caroline, who's always known how to handle difficult situations with grace and intelligence. The room erupted in applause. I sat there, my untouched steak going cold on the plate in front of me, watching my wife accept congratulations for her plan to humiliate me further. Nobody looked at me. Nobody asked if I was okay. I was just Caroline's dropout husband, the failure who needed to be managed like a bad investment. I stood up quietly, placed my napkin on the table, and walked out of that ballroom without saying a word. Caroline didn't even notice I'd left until I was already in my truck, driving away from the Grandview Hotel, away from her promotion party, away from 8 years of slowly suffocating under the weight of her contempt. What Caroline didn't know, what her Harvard MBA hadn't taught her, what her father's business experience couldn't predict was that tomorrow morning when they arrived at my garage office expecting to find a desperate failure ready to sell, they were going to discover exactly what happens when you underestimate the dropout. My name is Jake Morrison, and this is the story of how my Ivy League wife tried to destroy my company and ended up destroying everything she'd built instead. If you're already invested in this story of revenge and redemption, do me a favor right now. Hit that subscribe button, drop a comment below telling me about a time someone underestimated you, and smash that like button. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this unfolds. 8 years earlier, I'd met Caroline at a coffee shop near the Stanford campus. I was 24, working on code for what would eventually become my company. She was 23, finishing her MBA at Harvard but visiting the Bay Area for recruiting season. We hit it off immediately. She was brilliant, ambitious, driven. I was passionate about technology, building something from nothing, changing how businesses manage their operations. "You're not like the other tech bros," she'd said on our third date. "You actually listen. You think about the bigger picture." I'd fallen hard. Proposed after a year. Married 6 months later in a ceremony her parents paid for because my software company was still in its infancy, barely breaking even. Richard had made a speech at our wedding about how proud he was that his daughter had found someone with potential, even if I hadn't finished my computer science degree at UCLA. "Sometimes the best entrepreneurs are the ones who can't follow the traditional path," he'd said, and everyone had laughed like it was a compliment. But I'd heard the subtext. "You're not good enough for my daughter, but she's chosen you, so we'll make the best of it." The first few years weren't bad. Caroline climbed the corporate ladder at Henderson Financial, a massive investment firm where her father had connections. I worked 80-hour weeks building my company, Vertex Solutions, from the ground up. We specialized in enterprise resource planning software, helping mid-sized companies streamline their operations. Nothing sexy, nothing that would make headlines, just solid, practical software that solved real problems. But as Caroline's career accelerated, mine seemed to stall in her eyes. She'd come home talking about million-dollar deals, international clients, promotions that came with corner offices and executive parking spots. I'd come home talking about debugging code, about finally landing a client in Minnesota, about the slow, unglamorous work of building something sustainable. "Jake, when are you going to grow up?" she'd ask me about 2 years into our marriage. "When are you going to stop playing in the garage and get a real job?" "This is a real job, Caroline. We had 12 new clients last quarter." 12, she'd laughed. "I closed a deal yesterday worth more than your entire company's annual revenue." That became the pattern. Every conversation turned into a comparison. Every achievement I had was diminished by one of hers. Every time I tried to share excitement about a breakthrough or a new contract, she'd remind me that I was still just the dropout playing with computers while she was building an actual career. Her father was worse. Richard Patterson had built his own investment firm from the ground up, and he never let anyone forget it. He'd sit at our dinner table, pontificating about business strategy, market trends, the importance of proper education and credentials. And he'd look at me like I was a charity case his daughter had taken on. "Jake, have you ever considered going back to school?" he'd asked me during Thanksgiving dinner 3 years ago. "Get that degree finished, maybe even pursue an MBA like Caroline. Give yourself some credibility in the business world." "I'm building a business, Richard. The degree doesn't matter when you're creating value." "Everything matters when you're trying to be taken seriously," he'd replied, cutting into his turkey with the precision of a man who'd spent his life cutting down people's dreams. "Credentials open doors. What you're doing is just hoping doors stay unlocked." Caroline had nodded along, agreeing with her father like she always did. That was when I'd realized our marriage was in trouble. Not because we disagreed, but because she'd stopped seeing me as a partner and started seeing me as a project that needed fixing. The criticism became constant. My company wasn't growing fast enough. My decisions weren't strategic enough. My refusal to hire based on her father's recommendations wasn't smart business. Every conversation became an opportunity for her to point out my failures, to remind me that while she was thriving in the real business world, I was barely surviving in my garage. "You know what your problem is?" she'd said 6 months ago, after I'd turned down another one of her father's suggestions to bring in outside investors. "You're too proud to admit you need help. Real businessmen know when to accept assistance from people who actually understand how things work. Real businessmen also know when someone's trying to take over their company," I'd replied. She'd looked at me with something close to pity. "Jake, nobody wants to take over your company. Trust me, there's nothing there worth taking." That conversation had been the turning point. I'd stopped sharing anything about Vertex Solutions with Caroline. Stopped telling her about new clients, new contracts, new developments. Let her think whatever she wanted about my failing little garage business while I focused on actually building something real. What Caroline didn't know, what I'd deliberately kept from her for the past 6 months, was that Vertex Solutions wasn't failing at all. In fact, we were on the verge of something massive. The morning after her promotion party, I woke up at 5 a.m. in my office. I'd spent the night on the couch in the corner, not wanting to go home, not wanting to face Caroline's triumphant expression. My business partner, Tyler Chen, had texted me around midnight. "Saw the video, your wife posted it on her social media. Dude, I'm sorry. But remember what's happening tomorrow at 10 a.m. Let them come." I'd smiled at that text. Tyler had been my roommate at UCLA before I'd dropped out to focus on Vertex. He'd stayed, finished his degree, then joined me anyway because he believed in what we were building. For the past 6 months, we'd been in negotiations with a Fortune 500 company. They wanted to buy our technology, specifically our proprietary algorithm that optimized supply chain management in ways no other software could match. The offer was substantial. More substantial than anyone knew except Tyler and me. We'd kept it quiet, waiting for the contracts to be finalized, waiting for the lawyers to finish their work. And today, at 10 a.m., exactly when Caroline and her father were planning to arrive at my garage to make their insulting buyout offer, I was scheduled for a video call with the acquisition team to sign the final papers. The timing was almost too perfect. At 9:30 a.m., I heard Caroline's Mercedes pull into the driveway, followed by her father's Lexus. I was sitting at my desk, laptop open, video call ready. Tyler was beside me, and our lawyer, Jennifer Rothman, was on standby. Caroline walked in first, followed by Richard. They both looked like they were attending a funeral, which I suppose in their minds they were. The funeral of my failed business. "Jake," Caroline said, her voice carrying that same condescending tone from the night before. "We need to talk about your company's future." "Do we?" I asked, not looking up from my screen. Richard cleared his throat. "Son, we're here to help. Caroline told me about your financial situation, about how you've been struggling, and we've discussed it, and we're prepared to make you an offer. We'll buy Vertex Solutions, pay off your debts, give you enough to start fresh. Maybe go back to school, finish that degree." "How generous," I said, finally looking at them. "What's your offer?" Caroline pulled out a folder, placing it on my desk like she was serving legal papers. "We're offering $250,000. That's more than fair given your current revenue and the fact that you've never turned a real profit." I picked up the folder, glanced at the terms they'd drawn up without my input, without my agreement, without even asking if I was interested in selling. They'd just assumed I was desperate enough, broken enough, failed enough to accept whatever scraps they threw my way. "That's your offer," I said. $250,000 for a company I've built over 8 years. "Jake, be realistic," Richard said. "Your company is worth whatever someone's willing to pay for it. And right now, we're the only ones willing to pay anything." "Are you?" I smiled, and I saw Caroline's expression flicker with confusion. "Tyler, what time is it?" 9:58 a.m., Tyler said from his desk in the corner. "Perfect timing." I turned my laptop screen toward them. "See, here's the thing. You're not the only ones interested in my failing little garage business. In fact, about 2 minutes from now, I'm going to have a video call with the acquisition team from Bridgepoint Technologies." Caroline's face went pale. "Bridgepoint? The Bridgepoint?" "The very same," I confirmed. "You know that Fortune 500 company your firm tried to partner with last year? The one that turned Henderson Financial down because your proposal wasn't innovative enough?" Richard was staring at the screen. "What's going on here?" "What's going on," I said as the video call notification popped up, "is that Bridgepoint has been negotiating to acquire Vertex Solutions for the past 6 months. They want our proprietary supply chain optimization algorithm, and they're willing to pay substantially more than your insulting $250,000 offer." I clicked accept on the video call. 3 faces appeared on screen: Bridgepoint's CEO, their CFO, and their head of acquisitions. "Good morning, Jake," the CEO said. "Are we ready to finalize this?" "Absolutely," I replied. "My lawyer has reviewed everything. We're good to proceed." Caroline was frozen, watching as I signed digital documents, as numbers appeared on screen, as the reality of what was happening finally registered. The acquisition price was $47 million. Not for the entire company, but for a 60% stake, with me staying on as CTO and maintaining creative control. When the call ended 20 minutes later, Caroline and Richard were still standing there, motionless, their insulting buyout offer forgotten on my desk. $47 million, Caroline whispered. "Your company is worth $47 million? "Apparently more than that," I said. "They valued us at $78 million total. I'm keeping 40% and a guaranteed position with complete autonomy, plus performance bonuses tied to how the technology performs in their ecosystem." Richard's face had gone red. "How? How is this possible? Your revenue streams, your client base, none of this makes sense." "It makes perfect sense if you actually understood the technology instead of just assuming I was a failure," I said. "Vertex Solutions doesn't have massive revenue because we've been in development mode. We've been building something revolutionary, something that every major supply chain company in the world is going to need. Bridgepoint saw that. They understood what we were creating. You just saw a dropout in a garage." Caroline sank into a chair, her carefully constructed world visibly crumbling. "Jake, I didn't know. You never told me." "I stopped telling you anything 6 months ago," I replied. "Every time I tried to share what was happening with the company, you'd dismiss it, mock it, remind me that I was just playing while you were building a real career, so I stopped sharing. I focused on the work while you focused on looking down on me." "But why didn't you say something?" she asked, tears forming in her eyes. "Last night at my party, you just sat there while you humiliated me in front of 200 people, I finished. "Yeah, I sat there. I listened to you announce your plan to buy my failing company, to put it out of its misery. I listened to your father toast to your ability to handle difficult situations, meaning me. And you know what I realized, Caroline? She was crying now, mascara running down her perfectly made-up face. I realized that you never actually loved me. You loved the idea of fixing me, of molding me into something your father would approve of. But you never loved Jake Morrison, the dropout who believed he could build something meaningful. You loved the project, the fixer-upper, the charity case. Richard tried to recover. Jake, let's be rational about this. You're emotional right now, understandably. But think about what this means for your marriage, for your family. My marriage ended last night when my wife publicly declared I was worthless, I said. And as for family, I'm going to build the one I should have had. People who believe in me, who support me, who don't measure my value by Harvard degrees and corporate titles. I pulled out an envelope I'd prepared the night before, sliding it across to Caroline. Divorce papers. I'm filing today. You'll get what the prenup states, which, considering I had nothing when we married and you've spent 8 years telling me I'm a failure, shouldn't be much of a debate. Jake, please, Caroline said, reaching for my hand. We can work through this. I made a mistake. I was just trying to help. Help? I laughed, pulling my hand away. Caroline, you weren't trying to help. You were trying to control, to manage, to force me into being someone I'm not. Well, congratulations. You've successfully managed me right out of your life. Tyler cleared his throat from the corner. Jake, the Bridgepoint team wants to schedule a celebration dinner tonight. They're flying in from Seattle. You should probably get ready for that. I stood up, gathering my things. Yeah, let's do that. It'll be nice to spend an evening with people who actually respect what I've built. As I walked toward the door, Caroline called out one more time. What am I supposed to tell people? Everyone saw that video. Everyone knows what I said. I turned back, looking at her. Really looking at her for the first time in years. Tell them the truth, Caroline. Tell them that you're the one who failed. Not in business, you're great at that. But in marriage, in partnership, in seeing the person right in front of you for who they actually are. Tell them that your Harvard MBA didn't teach you the most important lesson. Never underestimate the people you're supposed to love. The next few weeks were chaos, but the good kind. The kind that comes from success rather than failure. The Bridgepoint acquisition made headlines in the tech industry. Former UCLA dropout sells company for $47 million, read one article. Supply chain revolution, how Vertex Solutions changed the game, read another. Caroline tried calling me dozens of times, but I never answered. Her father tried setting up meetings through intermediaries, probably hoping to salvage some kind of business relationship. I declined every request. My lawyer, Jennifer, handled all communication about the divorce. She's contesting the prenup, Jennifer told me during one of our meetings. Claims that you hid assets, that you deliberately concealed the company's true value. I didn't hide anything, I said. I just stopped sharing because she stopped listening. That's not going to hold up well for her. I have documentation of every time she publicly disparaged your company, including that video from her promotion party. It's pretty clear she had no faith in Vertex Solutions. She can't claim she deserves a piece of something she actively tried to destroy. The divorce finalized 3 months later. Caroline got nothing from the sale because the prenup was ironclad, and the company had been entirely mine, built before and during our marriage with no financial contribution from her. She tried arguing that her emotional support counted as contribution, but the judge wasn't sympathetic, especially after watching the video of her promotion party speech. Mrs. Morrison, the judge had said, you can't spend years publicly declaring something worthless and then claim it has value only after someone else recognizes its worth. That's not how contribution works. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Caroline's promotion at Henderson Financial was quietly rescinded. Turned out that publicly humiliating your spouse in a viral video wasn't great for corporate image. Richard's investment firm lost several clients who didn't appreciate the way he'd tried to strong-arm a successful entrepreneur. Karma, it seemed, had a sense of humor. Tyler and I threw a party 6 months after the acquisition, celebrating Vertex Solutions' integration into Bridgepoint's operations. Our algorithm was being used by 200 companies worldwide, revolutionizing how they managed their supply chains. The technology I'd built in my garage was changing an entire industry. Remember when they offered us $250,000? Tyler said, raising his beer. Best rejection of your life. Second best, I corrected. The best rejection was when I stopped accepting Caroline's version of who I was supposed to be. At that same party, I met Sarah Mitchell, a venture capitalist who specialized in early-stage tech companies. She was brilliant, funny, and genuinely interested in the work itself rather than the money it generated. We talked for hours about technology, about building companies, about the importance of believing in something even when everyone tells you you're crazy. "I heard about what your ex-wife did," Sarah said. "That promotion party video made the rounds in investment circles. People were shocked." "Are they still?" "Not anymore. Now they use it as a cautionary tale about recognizing value, about how the most revolutionary companies often look unimpressive from the outside, about how credentials don't equal wisdom." We started dating shortly after that party. Sarah never once asked me why I'd dropped out of UCLA or whether I regretted not getting my MBA. She cared about what I was building, about where I was going, about who I was becoming. A year after the acquisition, I was invited to speak at a tech conference in San Francisco. The topic was building despite the doubters. I almost declined because I didn't want to turn my marriage disaster into a speaking opportunity, but Tyler convinced me that the story needed to be told. People need to hear this, Jake. Not just about the money or the success, but about staying true to your vision when everyone around you says you're wrong. That's what innovation actually requires. So I went. And as I stood on that stage, looking out at 500 people who'd come to hear about building companies against the odds, I shared the whole story. The garage, the doubt, the dismissiveness, the promotion party, the divorce, all of it. "My ex-wife had an Ivy League MBA," I said toward the end of my talk. "She had every credential, every advantage, every reason to be confident in her judgment, and she was absolutely certain that my company was worthless. She was certain because she'd been taught that success looks a certain way, that value comes from specific credentials, that people without those markers couldn't possibly build anything important." I paused, letting that sink in. But here's what her Harvard MBA didn't teach her. Disruption never looks impressive at first. Innovation doesn't follow traditional playbooks. The most valuable companies in history started in garages and dorm rooms and weird little workshops because that's where people go when they're building something new. Something that doesn't fit the old models, the old assumptions, the old ways of measuring worth. After the talk, dozens of white people came up to share their own stories. Entrepreneurs who'd been dismissed by spouses, parents, friends. People who'd dropped out or never gone to college or chosen unconventional paths. People who'd been told they were wasting their time, wasting their potential, wasting their lives. "You gave me permission to stop apologizing," one young woman said, tears in her eyes. "I've been making myself small because my family thinks my startup is a joke. But you're right. Their credentials don't mean they understand what I'm building." That conversation reminded me why I'd agreed to speak in the first place. Not to gloat about my success or embarrass Caroline further, but to tell everyone who'd ever been underestimated that they weren't crazy. That their vision mattered. That credentials and pedigrees and traditional markers of success don't determine who gets to build the future. 3 years after the acquisition, Vertex Solutions Technology was running in over 1,000 companies, worldwide. Bridgepoint had promoted me to Chief Innovation Officer, giving me resources to develop new technologies. My personal net worth had grown substantially through stock options and performance bonuses. But the real victory wasn't the money or the titles or the success. It was the freedom to be exactly who I was without apologizing, without explaining, without trying to fit someone else's definition of worthy. Sarah and I got engaged on a beach in Santa Cruz. No fancy party, no pressure, just two people who'd found each other after learning what they actually needed in a partner. She proposed to me, actually, which seemed fitting given how our whole relationship had been built on rejecting traditional expectations. "You know I don't have an MBA," I joked when she pulled out the ring. "Good," she'd replied. "I don't want someone who thinks success comes from following formulas. I want someone who builds their own path. Someone brave enough to be underestimated and keep going." Anyway, I heard Caroline got remarried to another executive at Henderson Financial, someone with the right credentials, the right background, the right pedigree. I genuinely hoped she was happy, that she'd found what she was looking for. Our marriage had been wrong for both of us, just in different ways. My father called me a few months after the engagement to tell me he was proud. Not proud of the money or the success, but proud that I'd stayed true to myself. Son, you could have gone back to school when everyone was pressuring you, could have gotten that MBA, played the game everyone wanted you to play. But you didn't. You trusted yourself even when it cost you everything. That takes more courage than any degree. Thanks, Dad. That means a lot. And Jake? Your mother would be proud too. She always said you had something special, something that couldn't be taught in classrooms. Looks like she was right. Looking back now, 5 years after that promotion party, I realize Caroline did me a favor. Not intentionally, obviously, but by pushing me to that breaking point, by humiliating me so completely, she forced me to choose. To either accept her definition of failure or to prove her wrong. To either shrink myself to fit her expectations or to grow into who I actually was. I chose growth. I chose truth. I chose to stop apologizing for being the dropout in the garage who believed he could change an industry. And in the end, that choice made all the difference. My company is now worth over $200 million. We employ 300 people across 4 offices. The technology we built is being taught in business schools as a case study in innovation. And I'm still the same dropout who started coding in his garage, just with better resources and people who actually believe in the vision. Sometimes I think about that night at the Grandview Hotel, about Caroline standing at that podium announcing her plan to buy my failing company, about how confident she'd been, how certain, about how 200 people had applauded her wisdom, her pragmatism, her ability to handle difficult situations. And then I think about the next morning, about the look on her face when she realized she'd been wrong about everything, about the moment she understood that her Harvard MBA hadn't prepared her for the most important lesson in business and in life. The people you underestimate are often the ones who end up changing the world. My name is Jake Morrison. I'm a college dropout who built a technology company in his garage while his Ivy League wife told everyone I was a failure. And I learned that sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is their complete lack of faith in your abilities. Because it forces you to stop seeking their approval and start proving something to yourself instead. To everyone watching this who's been told they're not enough, who's been dismissed, who's been made to feel small by people with impressive credentials and absolute confidence, remember this. Credentials measure what you've learned from others. Success measures what you've learned from yourself. And the future belongs to the people brave enough to trust their own vision, even when everyone else calls them crazy. Thank you for watching this story. If it resonated with you, if it reminded you that your worth isn't determined by other people's credentials or opinions, please share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below about a time you were underestimated and proved them wrong. And subscribe to this channel for more stories about ordinary people who refuse to accept other people's definitions of success and built extraordinary lives as a result.